Paddy, we're here today to talk about Grabbers, a horror comedy about aliens invading an Irish village. And I wanted to know, you were this VFX supervisor on the film, weren't you? What did that involve?
Well, I mean, it's a monster movie, so essentially we're responsible for the monsters. In the most part in Grabbers, they are computer generated. Hopefully, you can't tell. The proportion of them are done with practical rubber prosthetic creature effects, but I would say it's sort of 90% CGI, and that's what I'm actually looking after on this film.
So how does it work then when you are working with prosthetics and CGI, although you say it's 90% CGI? What's the practical side for you?
Well, it's always good to have at least something that's physical, for particularly for the actors to grab hold of, and there are a few scenes where the actors actually have to kind of grab things and throw things around and fight with things. And in that sense, it's always great to have something physical to play with. And also there's a scene where one of the creatures appears to be dead. It's lying on a kind of a lab table. So for that sequence, it would have been a bit silly to have that in CGI for all those shots. So we had a very talented prosthetic creature builder and designer called Sean Harrison, who made some lovely rubber creatures for us.
What was your inspiration for the look for the aliens? So they're very distinctive, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, it's a process trying to work out an interesting and original design for a creature movie. And our inspiration obviously ultimately has to be the screenwriting, and in this case Kevin Lahan, the screenwriter, gave us some really good clues in the way he wrote things. There's some very nice kind of descriptive passages that kind of in your mind's eye conjure up quite a strong image. So that's a good starting point. But beyond that, you just look back through monster movies, through history. You look at illustrations. There's the whole kind of Lovecraft thing that we were kind of quite into. But it's just trying to work out something original to do with a tentacle squid monster, really. I should say actually that, this is top of my mind because I just read an interesting article. It's an interview with our director John Wright, and he was talking about how we were able to use the fact that this was a 15 certificate, because it had a lot of, it's about drinking, there's a lot of swearing in it, so it was never going to be a PG. So that kind of freed us up to actually let the creature be a bit nastier than you might normally do in a film that might possibly be a 12 or a PG. So the look of the creature does allude to body parts. It's kind of a bum and it's kind of a vagina and this and that. So it's we didn't shy away from that stuff.
And you're talking about different films, as well as of course Lovecraft was a big inspiration for it as well. What kind of films were you thinking about when you were coming to design the aliens?
Well, it's not so much the specific design, so much as just the whole genre of monster movies, So obviously there's Tremors, which is possibly the film that this is most similar to in tone. But those are big maggoty kind of, digging monsters, so they're kind of different, and they live in a deserty, dry place. So. And they're very 80s, they're very much the kind of, apotheosis of giant prosthetic animatronic creatures. Jaws is a great creature movie, Gremlins, but these are all very different for our creature. So in terms of kind of giant slimy tentacle things, I mean, there was nothing really we looked at and we went, wow, we want it to be like that, because there's nothing really out there. One of the very few I can think of there's a bit in, I think, the first Lord of the Rings film where things come out of the river and they're all tentacly. There's the kind of Kraken thing in Pirates of the Caribbean. But I think really we took our inspiration from nature, that's the thing. Just finding photographs of various bizarre deep sea squids. There's a thing called a Vampirotuthis, which is quite a rare squid that you can find some YouTube videos of. And occasionally a trawler will bring one up to deck, and this thing is lying all flat and squidged. But the texture of that and the look of the tentacles and stuff, mostly our inspiration was actually from nature rather than other movies.
Oh right, that's interesting. Talking about the size of the movie as well, what kind of challenges does that bring with VFX as a supervisor?
Well, you've got to work smart. There's an inherent sort of amount of wastage that's sort of accepted on a big budget film. Those are, big budget films are like big juggernauts or a big ocean tanker, and they take a lot of time to change direction, and there's a lot of people involved and a lot of decision makers, and this is part of the reason why they burn through the money, because there's an inherent sort of lack of discipline there in a sense. Whereas on an independent film with a very restricted budget, we've got to be very clear about what we can achieve for the money. And really the key for us and for everyone was a direct line to the director. So we worked, very, very closely with John Wright to design the creatures, work out what he wanted, design the creature before we went into the shoot, get a really good idea of how big it was and how it moved and all the rest of it, so that John could then direct the actors to react appropriately, and the cameraman in terms of framing. It's all the challenges of shooting CGI stuff that's not there. So it's mostly planning, really, getting stuff worked out ahead of time, and minimising wastage.
Grabbers was actually Invisible's first major CG creature work, wasn't it?
Yes.
So
yes.
How are you hoping to take that forward now?
Well, yeah, it was a project we jumped on because we just knew it was a golden opportunity to kind of show what we can do in terms of creature work, which is generally accepted as one of the more difficult things you can do in CGI and VFX. Off the back of Grabbers, we've got a nice little cameo creature in Skyfall. There's a scene where there's a scorpion, and that was basically ours. So I'd say that if we hadn't done Grabbers, we wouldn't have got that work on Skyfall. And going into next year, there's some other things in the pipeline which I can't mention, but they're some very nice little horror movies with some deeply creepy stuff going in. Fingers crossed on that.
Fantastic. Well, I hope to hear more about that in the near future. Yeah. I mean, what was it like working on, say, Skyfall? Because that is a super big budget, super machine, isn't it?
Yeah.
And everyone's expecting so much, waiting for the next Bond film to come along.
Yes, it's a treat. I mean, everyone on that film, from Sam Mendes downward, are totally at the top of their game. So that for us was just a challenge to make sure that we were, not letting the side down. And individually, even though Invisible, that I part own and work for, is quite a small new company, the people that I work with here have been in the business for a while. So I've done bits and bobs on Bond movies before, but for this particular group, it was our first outing, and it's just a treat because everything is very well resourced and very well planned, and there's no messing about on a Bond film. And
that particular scene you're talking about, when Bond kind of goes off and leaves the service, were you given very clear directions on what was needed, or was there quite a lot of input from you and the Invisible guys on that side? How did it work?
I mean, pretty clear direction. For us, the supervision of the shoot, my colleague Hugh MacDonald went out to Turkey, I think, to shoot that scene, and our responsibility is pretty much a technical one. So we have to make sure that Sam, the director, and the cast had everything they needed to react to something that wasn't there. So for Daniel Craig, for example, who is basically got to have a scorpion on the back of his hand, we have to put a little stand-in object, basically a strange little construction of wire that helps us because it means that we've got something to lock onto for where the scorpion is on his hand, rather than just looking at the skin and trying to kind of work out what's going on. A little kind of mechanical thing is very helpful, and it's very helpful for the actor because he can actually look at something. And one of the key things about CGI is often when it doesn't look great or it doesn't work, it's not just because the CGI isn't done well, it's because the performances of the cast may be a bit off because they don't quite know what they're looking at. Nobody's told them where the eye line is or how to react and so on, and you just kind of sense that the thing is not really there because of that reason. So yeah, it was a technical exercise in supervision, really.
So what was it like when you saw that scorpion up on the big screen and everyone's reaction to it?
Well, the thing about any visual effect is that we will have looked at something over and over and over again hundreds of times, literally hundreds of times, almost until you can't see it anymore. You've looked at it so much. So when you see it actually cut into a movie in a cinema with an audience, you never quite know how it's going to go down. You kind of hope that you've done everything you possibly can to make it great. But we've since heard from quite a few people that they just thought it was a real scorpion and they're completely surprised. So that's the best thing you can hear, really, from our point of view.